North Korean trainers coming into Russia. This is now a global alignment of our adversaries from Russia to China, Iran, and North Korea. Can NATO play that bridge between the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic? This is the third summit where our four Indo-Pacific prime ministers are here. Their commitment is getting stronger. Can NATO play that role?
Yes, and we are seeing it play exactly that role. You mentioned this is the third summit in a row that we've had Indo-Pacific partners here at NATO. Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea. And it's a reflection of the fact of exactly what you said, that these challenges are linked, that our theaters of work together are linked. And maybe this was crystallized by Ukraine when Prime Minister Kishida of Japan said that what's happening in Europe today could be happening in East Asia tomorrow. When Russia committed its aggression, its renewed aggression against Ukraine, and Japan stood up, South Korea stood up, Australia, New Zealand. This was a reflection of that recognition that these challenges are linked, and when democracies stand together, whether they're in Europe, Asia, or elsewhere, we're going to be stronger and more effective. So as we're gathering here in Washington with our Indo-Pacific partners, what this means is we are breaking down the silos between Europe, Asia, and the United States. And this has been a very deliberate objective of President Biden from day one. Not only building convergence with our allies, stronger convergence when it comes to how to approach Russia, and in a different way, how to approach China, but also breaking down the barriers, the walls between European partners and Asian partners. And of course, what's happened just in the last year and a half has only reinforced the imperative. Ukraine. We see, unfortunately, China not providing weapons to Russia to pursue its aggression, but being the major contributor to Russia's defense industrial base. 70% of the machine tools that Russia's importing are coming from China. 90% of the microelectronics that Russia's importing coming from China. That's enabled it to sustain its aggression against Ukraine. We've seen a massive buildup of its weaponry over the last year and a half. Tanks, missiles, munitions. That's the product of a defense industrial base being fueled by China. As a result, European allies understand the challenge posed by China to Europe's security. And of course, China can't have it both ways. It can't be all at once, or claim to be, for peace and want to have better relations with Europe, while at the same time fueling what is arguably the most significant threat to European security since the end of the Cold War. We see it in the relationship between Russia and North Korea. That's abundantly clear. And in all of these areas, as well as some of the hybrid threats that you alluded to before, the connections are clearer and clearer. The alliance is one place, and maybe, I would argue, a central place, where we can bring everyone together so that we're acting together.
So, Mr. Secretary, you're talking about strengthening this global alliance, which the United States has built over the last 75 years. You have some very vocal American national security analysts saying there's one thing we have to focus on: China. Everything else is a waste. Let our allies deal with everything else. We have to focus on China. What is your answer to that criticism or critique of what you're trying to build here?
Well, my answer is, first of all, of course, we are focusing on China, and we're doing it in two ways. One, we're making the investments in ourselves at home to make sure that we're approaching China from a position of domestic strength. When you look at everything that's happened over the last 3.5 years with the incredible investments in our own infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our communications, through the Infrastructure Act. When you look at our commitment to make sure that we maintain our leadership, our world leadership on microelectronics and chips through the Chips and Science Act. When you look at the investments that have been made in climate technology, which is going to be a critical part of the 21st century economy, that puts the United States in a position of strength. European allies are doing exactly the same thing. But the other aspect of this is not only, as we've done, re-energize our alliances and partnerships, starting with Europe, but also make sure that there is greater and greater convergence in our approach to some of the challenges posed by China. I think if you look at what NATO has said in the strategic concept, if you look at what key Europeans have said, what the European Union has said, it is abundantly clear that we have more convergence now when it comes to how to approach China than we've ever had. And that's a source of tremendous strength. It means that instead of having one country having to deal with the challenges alone, the United States representing maybe 20% of world GDP, suddenly we've aligned 40, 50, and with our Asian partners, 60% of world GDP. that makes a huge difference. And so precisely because these challenges are joined, dealing with some of the problems posed by China requires this work with, alignment with, convergence with Europe as well as with Asia.
I believe I would say, maybe using a little bit of that Truman simplicity, the adversary has a vote and they are aligning. We have not the luxury of focusing on one.
That's correct. And this is, I think it's a really important point. This is not simply a reflection of our choices. It's a reflection of the choices, the policies that China has chosen to pursue. And of course, that Russia is pursuing in Ukraine right now.
And I think you're right. It does pose for all NATO members a structural challenge of how do you work in those multiple theaters when you're dealing with their alignment versus how we are organizing our alliances. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to turn, because you raised it, and I'm really glad you did, talking about alliance unity. We know that is the center of gravity. We know how important that is. And we also know that sacrifices sometimes have to be made to keep that unity. You hear mutterings of the least common denominator. We're not getting exactly what we want because we have to ensure that alliance unity. But I think over the last week, we're crossing a threshold where accepting unity, we're sacrificing or jeopardizing NATO security. You had one NATO member who has now visited Moscow and Beijing. He's talked about Beijing as being a strategic partner, has received by NATO and the EU an opt-out of support for Ukraine. You had another member this week suggest that they would like to be welcomed into a security organization that is also it participated with Russia and China. NATO's message has to be clear, does it not?
Well, I think
this is getting to a point of straining unity.
NATO's message is very clear. It's very clear in what's happening here in Washington over these couple of days. It's very clear in the entire trajectory of the alliance over the last 3.5 years. An alliance that's now 32 members strong, with Finland and Sweden, of course, joining. An alliance that is better budgeted and resourced than it's ever been. When we started out, 9 members of the alliance were meeting the 2% of GDP for defense threshold that was set at the Wales Summit. We're now at 23 NATO allies. So NATO is speaking loudly and clearly with its actions. As I mentioned before, we have a strategic concept agreed among all the allies that very well reflects the challenges and threats that we face today and will be facing tomorrow. So I see NATO speaking not only with unity, but unity that's actually raising the floor on what NATO partners are contributing, raising the floor on an understanding of the threats that we face, raising the floor on our commitment to take action together to deal with those threats. So far from a race to the bottom just for the sake of consensus or unity, what I'm seeing is a race to the top by this alliance. Again, it's let's be very simple about it. NATO is stronger than it's ever been. It's bigger than it's ever been. It's more fit for purpose than it's ever been.
I think, Mr. Secretary, it's not about necessarily the 2%, and I think we're going to be raising that bar,
yes.
Don't you think? It's going to be the new 2.5, maybe even the new 3% if we're heading into this era of tremendous instability. No, but I'm saying even a NATO member can spend 2%, but still be working to undermine the security of the alliance itself. So it's not just 2%. How do we get back to, again, that core of the Washington Treaty, the preamble? We defend democracy. We defend a certain set of values. When allies don't profess necessarily to uphold those values, what's the answer? I mean, this is about us. It's not about the adversary. It's about who we are.
Of course, allies, as we speak, for the last 2.5 years now, have been defending those values, defending our democracy that's at stake in Ukraine. They know that it's not only about Ukraine, it's not only about the Ukrainian people, it's actually about the values that unite us and the basic principles that all of us have agreed on together with so many other countries around the world that were designed to try to keep the peace and protect against aggression. And NATO countries are standing up day after day to defend those principles, to defend those values. Now look, communicating with adversaries, with enemies, that's fine. Communications are important. You want to make sure that at least you're not misunderstanding each other. But of course, what's communicated is really important as well. I would hope that anyone, for example, going to Moscow now, makes very clear to Vladimir Putin that NATO's not going anywhere, Ukraine's not going anywhere, the European Union's not going anywhere, and that what we just saw the other day, a horrific attack on a children's hospital, is totally, totally, totally unacceptable, and Russia will continue to be ostracized as long as it engages in those kinds of actions. I would hope and expect that anyone going to Beijing makes clear what I said a moment ago, that continuing to fuel Russia's defense industrial base, continuing to allow the greatest threat to European security since the end of the Cold War to go forward, is something that is unacceptable to Europe. And that means unacceptable is a word. Actions follow that, including, as necessary, sanctions, including, as necessary, not allowing relations that Beijing might seek to improve to actually improve. So what we're focused on is what allies and partners are doing, and I can tell you as an alliance, what we're doing is evidencing greater strength and commitment to the principles, the values that are at the heart of this alliance that I've seen.
Are you confident those messages are being sent?
I have confidence those messages are being sent.
Right.
But again, we come together as 32 countries. From the perspective of the United States, it's so important that we listen to each other, that we communicate clearly with each other, and yes, we develop consensus. But what I'm seeing again is a consensus that is moving us up, not holding us back.
So we welcomed, this is Sweden's first
right.
NATO summit. Great to come in. We've got this bolt of energy. I feel it with Sweden, Finland joining. There's an energy in the Nordic, Baltic quadrant of NATO. How has it been to welcome those new men? They're seeing what's behind the curtain. How have you introduced your two new colleagues now into NATO? Tell us some good stories.
Well, of course, Sweden and Finland have been NATO partners for a long time. They've contributed tremendously to the alliance, to our common endeavors for a long time. But to have them at the table is something I suspect most people in this room 3 years ago, I doubt anyone really would have imagined that.
If you would have read a lot of think tank reports 15 years ago, you would have known this would have been the case. But that's okay.
I might have
let it slip.
I might have written one or two of those reports back in the day.
Good,
So,
see?
but in all seriousness, you're right. I think it has added a jolt of energy. They're both remarkable partners. They bring so much to the alliance. They change the strategic equation in a very powerful way. But it's also a reflection of new realities that the entire alliance is facing. New aggression, new forms of aggression, a new determination to stand up together to combat it. But look, we have a little kept secret for the alliance is there's a pretty strong Nordic and Scandinavian component to this alliance, as evidenced by Jens Stoltenberg. President Biden gave him the Medal of Freedom last night. And that was a very powerful reflection of the extraordinary leadership that he's demonstrated over a decade of incredible change for NATO, but a decade that he's managed with brilliance.
Well, he's really had a unique talent of communicating with some of those allies that don't see eye to eye, always with the consensus, was incredibly important in resolving some of the difficulties in the run up to welcoming Sweden and Finland. Any advice for his successor about how to manage the diplomacy of maintaining alliance unity?
Well, I know Mark Rutte. I think many in this room do as well. I have tremendous confidence in his abilities to take the torch from Jens and to do what Jens did so brilliantly, which was actually to listen to all of our partners, to build that consensus, to demonstrate through our actions that unity really is our most valuable currency, and to build it every single day. But it doesn't just happen. It's the product of being engaged every single day, not pulling back, not isolating ourselves, actually leaning in, leaning forward. I know Mark is going to do that brilliantly, and I think the trajectory we're on with all of our member states is to continue to do exactly that.
So, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to end. My last question is going to be a historical question, but moving forward. Mm-hmm. So, as Dean Acheson asked, it is for others to judge, and the 71st Secretary of State just rendered judgment on the 51st Secretary of State's judgment. So let's look forward. When NATO celebrates its 150th anniversary, next 75
Look forward
years.
To seeing you all there, by the way.
Yes, exactly. We'll be in our wheelchairs, exactly. What judgment would you like your successor to render about what you have done here on the 75th anniversary to keep 1 billion people safe? Will they know that we've done enough to advance the cause of freedom?
The The proof will be in the tests that are in front of us and how we meet them. But I hope that when we look back on this period in time, one of the conclusions that people will reach is that the United States was leaning in. We re-engaged our alliance. We helped to re-energize our alliance. We helped to reimagine our alliance so that even as we celebrate 75 years of the most successful defensive alliance in history, we were resolutely focused on the future and doing everything that we could in our time to make sure that that success for 75 years would continue and that the alliance would be adapted, focused, fit for purpose for our time and for the years ahead. Because again, I come back to what I started with, Heather. This alliance is a reflection of a commitment that leaders in all of our countries make to the people we represent. A commitment that we do everything possible to keep them secure, to prevent wars, to deter conflict, so that they can move on with their lives in freedom, in security. And so if we manage, as the result of the actions that we've taken over these last years and in this period, to do that in the years ahead, we will have succeeded.
We will know we will do enough if Ukraine wins.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. This has been a great kickoff. I hope we've started things off. We've revved up our engines. I know you've provided a lot of food for thought. Thank you so much. I know you have to get back to start your summit, but first, will everyone please join me in warm applause.
Thank you.
For the Secretary of State.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. De que todos los ciudadanos a los que representamos los presidentes y presidentas de gobierno les deseamos una larga vida a esta alianza atlántica. En segundo lugar, el mensaje creo que es el mensaje de solidaridad con un pueblo, en este caso Ucrania, que está sufriendo el embate de una guerra injusta, ilegal, absolutamente injustificada, porque Ucrania no era una amenaza para el régimen de Putin en Rusia. Y, como ayer dijo el presidente Biden, antes del inicio de la guerra, Ucrania era un país libre e independiente y después de la guerra, gracias también a la solidaridad del conjunto de los países aliados, Ucrania continúa siendo un país libre e independiente. Y esto creo que es muy importante recordarlo siempre. Lo hemos dicho, yo particularmente también a la ciudadanía española desde el principio de la invasión de Putin hacia Ucrania, que Ucrania lo que está haciendo no es solamente defender su integridad territorial, no es solamente defender su derecho a existir, que se está poniendo en cuestión por parte de Putin, no es solamente su derecho a decidir libremente qué quieren ser en el futuro, es algo mucho más profundo y es la defensa de un orden internacional basado en reglas, de la defensa también del derecho internacional, que está siendo menoscabado como consecuencia de esta guerra ilegal, injusta e injustificada, y finalmente la defensa de unos valores democráticos, de ciudadanía libre, que están puestos en cuestión como consecuencia de la guerra de Putin en Ucrania. Por tanto, creo que es muy importante lo que va a suceder hoy. También las palabras ayer del secretario general Stoltenberg y del presidente Biden de compromiso, de solidaridad para con una ciudadanía, un país que está viendo en riesgo su propia existencia como consecuencia del imperialismo, en este caso del presidente Putin. Y finalmente, y esto para España es importante porque lo empezamos a desarrollar en la cumbre de la OTAN en Madrid, la necesidad también de un mayor compromiso por parte de la OTAN y de los aliados respecto al flanco sur. Saben ustedes que está la estrategia de 360 grados, Es verdad que, por desgracia, la inestabilidad, los efectos del cambio climático, el auge de dictaduras en detrimento de democracias en una parte muy importante, por ejemplo, para España, como es el Sahel, está haciendo que la presencia rusa cada vez sea mayor, que hay una mayor presencia de organizaciones terroristas o de organizaciones criminales que trafican con seres humanos y que están detrás, en buena medida, de pues todos aquellos fenómenos migratorios irregulares que, por desgracia, está sufriendo el Mediterráneo en estos últimos años. Creo que es importante el mensaje que vamos a trasladar. Creo que es muy relevante que después de la cumbre de Vilnius el año pasado en Lituania se celebrara un grupo de trabajo que nos va a presentar en el día de hoy un plan de acción de la OTAN hacia el sur, que evidentemente es de un interés absolutamente estratégico y fundamental para España. Por tanto, yo creo que estos son los tres mensajes que me gustaría trasladar. Primero, el de vigencia total y absoluta en el 75 aniversario de la OTAN de esta organización, de esta Alianza Atlántica, reforzando esos vínculos transatlánticos entre Europa y Estados Unidos y Canadá. En segundo lugar, el de la solidaridad con Ucrania, y el tercero, el del compromiso con el flanco sur, en definitiva, con todo aquello que para España es fundamental, como es la estabilidad y el desarrollo del Mediterráneo. Y un último apunte. Me van a permitir que, lógicamente, celebre la victoria de España ayer ante Francia y, por tanto, el pase de la selección española de fútbol a la final de la Eurocopa. Vamos a ver exactamente contra quién nos vamos a enfrentar, aunque viendo y leyendo los medios de comunicación, tanto nacionales como internacionales, es evidente que la selección española se ha ganado a pulso su condición de favorita. Y creo que efectivamente hay que celebrar y felicitar a un equipo de jugadores que han demostrado eso, ser equipo. Y eso significa ser solidarios, pensar en el conjunto, en el equipo y no en las individualidades, aunque evidentemente la calidad de muchos de los jugadores pues es extraordinaria, y desearles lo mejor, porque, como dije ayer en las redes sociales, está todo el país detrás de ellos. Estamos todos los españoles y españolas súper orgullosos del equipo nacional que tenemos y, desde luego, con una expectativa muy grande de que el próximo domingo podamos convertirnos en campeones de Europa. Muchísimas gracias.
across our country and to create good jobs for American workers. Now, all of that progress is a testament to U.S. leadership and allied solidarity. But it's also a testament to the leadership of our outgoing Secretary General, my good friend Jens Stoltenberg. Throughout a decade of challenge, Jens has guided the alliance with skill and steel. And we are all deeply, deeply grateful. Now, we're going to keep building on our progress, and we've got an ambitious agenda this week. First, we'll continue to implement NATO's new family of plans, the most robust since the Cold War. And that will significantly improve our ability to deter and defend against any new threat. Second, we'll work to endorse a pledge to expand industrial capacity across the alliance. And this will help us scale up military production and send an important long-term signal to industry. Third, we'll deepen cooperation in support of Ukraine's self-defense. We'll launch a new military effort to help coordinate some aspects of security assistance and training for Ukraine. And we're poised to agree on a new financial pledge to Ukraine. As another sign of our deep commitment to Ukraine's self-defense, a coalition of countries has been working tirelessly to provide F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. And today, President Biden, alongside the Dutch and Danish prime ministers, is proud to announce the transfer of F-16s is officially underway, and Ukraine will be flying F-16s this summer. And finally, we'll continue to deepen ties with our global partners, especially in the Indo-Pacific. I know that we're all troubled by China's support for Putin's war against Ukraine. But that just reminds us of the profound links between Euro-Atlantic security and Indo-Pacific security. And it sends a message to the world that we are united in our values. So we have a lot to tackle together. But we're also here to mark this moment. We're here to strengthen an alliance that has kept millions of people safe for 75 years. And we're here to reaffirm the ironclad commitment that those 12 leaders made on April 4th, 1949. An armed attack against one ally is an attack against us all. You know, as you heard Fred say, I had a brief 41-year career in uniform. I started working with NATO back in 1975 when I was Lieutenant Austin. And I've never seen NATO stronger or more united than it is today. And we are determined to keep it that way. You know, I learned a lesson early on in my Army career, and that lesson is that as a soldier, the last thing that you want to do is to fight alone. So here's the blunt military reality. America is stronger with our allies. America is safer with our allies. And America is more secure with our allies. And any attempt to undermine NATO only undermines American security. So we are here this week to strengthen NATO and to strengthen American and allied security for the next 75 years. As President Biden has said, our foes and rivals have tried to shatter our unity, but our democracies have stood unwavering. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the legacy that we celebrate. That is the vow that we uphold, and that is the work that we will continue. Thank you very much.
Secretary Austin, thank you so much for the speech, for your thoughts, for your leadership as well, for really underpinning and emphasizing the message that the last thing that a soldier would want to do is fight alone. With that, for our guests online, please tune in for conversations with Doug Lute, U.S. Ambassador to NATO, and Rachel Rizzo. And for all of us here, there is a coffee break. Please be back at 10:35 and enjoy the conversations. Thanks.
From Washington, D.C. at the NATO Public Forum. My name is Rachel Rizzo, and I am a non-resident senior fellow at the...
This year's summit with two keynote speakers, being Secretary General and President Biden. Secretary General stated that despite all the differences that we faced in the past years, this alliance proved to be not only longest lasting, but also the most successful alliance in the world and human history. I believe that as we see it as the sphere of cooperation, sphere of security, these arguments are true. Then we saw within the speech of President Biden a number of strong statements vis-à-vis Ukraine that were clearly stating that not only the path towards NATO membership is irreversible, but also that we collectively will not let Ukraine fall down. I think. Well, first, I would divide this issue into two lines. First is the most urgent, that is a provision of air defense to Ukraine. And President Biden announced the initiative of 5 countries to provide necessary systems as soon as possible. And second, in short and midterm, is the reinforcement of air defense within the eastern flank. And that will be part of a new phase of NATO defense planning process, where all the countries will receive new capability targets, including air defense. I believe so because there is a unanimous agreement on declaration that is quite straightforward, not only pointing to the fact that Russia is the most urgent security challenge to all of us, but also the need of supporting Ukraine as long as it takes. Pokud nedojde k nějakému dalšímu neočekávanému vývoji, tak to slovo tam bude. Je to důležité proto, že pro ukrajinské občany, ukrajinské ozbrojené síly je mimořádně důležité udržovat vysoký morál a k tomu potřebují perspektivu. Ta perspektiva je právě daná tím, že proces bude označen za nezvratný. Musím říct, že až překvapivě shoda na všech zásadních tématech. Já si myslím, že často je potřeba odhlédnout od některých titulků a věnovat se obsahu. A když jsme se bavili o obsahu těch hlavních témat, tak tam se v naprosté většině shodneme. Ať už se to týká Ukrajiny, vztahu k Rusku, Číně, případně provázanosti bezpečnostních problematik globálně. V tom všem jsme se shodli. O tom nepadlo ani slovo. My jsme se nebavili o konkrétních projektech, bavili jsme se o těch hlavních politických a bezpečnostních prioritách. Děkuji.
Good morning. Just a couple of words to kick off with. My foreign minister and defense minister will be here in a second as well. It's a great privilege to be here in my first NATO summit as President of the Republic of Finland. My first observation is to say that NATO has now doubled its border with Russia. And Russia is the biggest threat to the alliance. We in Finland fully understand the responsibility that we have as a new member state. We are very serious about our defense, have been so ever since World War II. You will see us as a security provider, not a security consumer. We hit all the targets set by the alliance. You will know that we have obligatory military service and 900,000 men and women that have done their service. We have 280,000 that we can mobilize at wartime. We have 62 F-18s, 64 F-35s, land, air, sea missiles, and the biggest artillery in Europe together with Poland. And there's a reason why we have that. We want to protect ourselves and we want to protect the alliance. As far as the summit is concerned, we're very happy with the final declaration and the outcome that we will see, especially on two accounts. One is defense and deterrence. We are seeing now, I would argue, the rebirth of NATO 3.0, a real Zeitenwende for the alliance, where we're putting our mouth where our money is, and we're showing that our operative capacity, our planning capacity, and in general our capacity is right there. And secondly, we are extremely happy about the language that we're getting in supporting Ukraine. It is, of course, for us, the most important conflict close to our border, and the support that we are giving Ukraine in terms of making it in the future into a NATO member, in terms of financial and military assistance, and in terms of coordinating assistance is extremely important. I think it's very important to give a message to the Kremlin from here that Ukraine's path and bridge towards NATO membership is now irreversible. And in that sense, I'm happy to be here celebrating the 75th anniversary of the strongest military alliance in the history of the world. With these words, I'm happy to take my foreign minister, defense minister, and then answer questions.
Just a quick word, sir.
Yeah.
If Mr. Putin isn't stopped in Ukraine, do you fear that the Baltic Sea is the next target? I know the Baltic nations are very concerned about the presence of Russia on their borders.
We don't fear anything. We plan for everything. That means that we look at different types of scenarios. But to be honest, I think the turns that we have right now, Finland, Sweden, Norway, all of us being part of the alliance, I don't think it makes any sense for Russia to make any kind of a move towards that direction. The Baltic Sea is now a NATO lake with an extremely strong defense capacity. I mentioned Poland with the biggest artillery together with Finland. I mentioned the Zeitenwende that Germany has done in its defense. And if you look at the capacity of Finland on land, capacity of Sweden and in the air and sea, and the capacity of Norway in general, I don't see the direction of Putin going towards the Baltic Sea at all. What we need to do now, and I follow the words of Secretary General Stoltenberg, is that the more we support Ukraine now, the sooner we can end the war. Coming eastbound or westbound from the Russian perspective is not a good idea. Well, I disagree with your basic premise. We've just had Keir Starmer elected as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I just spent a good hour with 15 senators, including also Chancellor Scholz, Prime Minister Starmer, Prime Minister Kristersson, and actually Jens Stoltenberg discussing the security situation in Europe. I have never seen the European Union or NATO as unified or as strong as we have been ever since Russia attacked Ukraine. Remember that there's a long history of this, and that history began in 2008 with Russia attacking Georgia. It continued with the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, and then a full-blown war in 2022. I think we reacted too late, but right now we're very strong and very unified, so I'm not worried that democracy would be throwing bad results at us. We're coping with it. Well, I'm avidly pro-American. I've done my undergraduate work at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina in the end of the 1980s and early 1990s. So if there's one thing that I'm concerned about with the United States is the polarization of the political climate. It is, I have to admit, very toxic. But when I meet 15 senators, as I just did at the Senate, there is strong bipartisan support for Ukraine and also for NATO. And let me add that no matter who is elected as President of the United States, Joe Biden or Donald Trump, the United States will remain a superpower. And in order for the United States to remain a superpower and in the driver's seat in its pivoting towards China, it needs allies. And the strongest allies actually come from Europe. We are a value-based alliance, 32 members in the alliance based on democracy. The United States has roughly 60 allies out of 200 countries in the world. So any idea that the United States would be turning its back against Europe, I simply don't buy that. I think, as far as I understand, the text is in what they call and I'm learning this because this is my first summit, in a NAC silent procedure. So basically it is looking quite good. I've read the conclusions through a couple of times and I'm very pleased with the outcome from the perspective of the alliance, but also from the perspective of a new member state like Finland. En lue, vaan luen sitä sillä tavalla, että NATO eli liittolaiset tulevat antamaan vahvan tuen Ukrainalle 3 kautta, josta ensimmäinen on rahallinen ja materiaalinen tuki, toinen on koordinaatio- ja missiotuki ja 3. on sitten tuki, eräänlainen silta kohti NATO-jäsenyyttä. I hope all of you agree. I am quite convinced that that type of language, in other words, words such as irreversible and bridge, will be found in the summit declaration. Why is this important? Because the only thing that Putin and Russia understands is power. And Putin and Russia need to understand that what they expected to do, the exact reverse happened. They wanted to Russify Ukraine, it became European. They wanted to prevent Ukraine's EU membership. They will become members of the European Union. They wanted to prevent the enlargement of NATO. Ukraine will become a NATO member. Finland and Sweden became NATO members as well. No, edelleen niin kuin lähtökohta on se, että kun nyt tapasin 15 senaattoria, myös ulkoministeri ja puolustusministeri ovat tavanneet kollegoitaan, niin olemme hyvin vakuuttuneita siitä, että riippumatta kuka valitaan Yhdysvaltain presidentiksi, niin Yhdysvaltain tuki Ukrainalle ja NATOlle jatkuu. Miksi? Koska se on Yhdysvaltain intressissä. Eilen keskustelin noin 10-15 minuuttia presidentti Bidenin kanssa, satuimme itse asiassa samaan jonoon ja samaan lämpiöön. Ja oikein hyvä keskustelu, analysoimme vähän maailmanpoliittista tilannetta ja hän kertoi näkemyksiään Suomesta, jotka olivat hyvinkin myönteisiä ja rakentavia. Hän puhui siitä, että Naton raja Venäjän kanssa on kaksinkertaistunut. Hän puhui siitä, miten vahva Suomen puolustus on ja hänen omista Suomen vierailuista. Myös taisimme puhua Vancouverin olympialaisista vuonna 2010, jolloin olemme katsomassa mäkihyppyä.
Olisiko Suomi ollut valmis kutsumaan jo tässä kokouksessa Ukrainan NATO-jäseneksi ja mitkä maat tämän konsensuksen esiin?
No, me olemme nuori, uusi jäsenmaa, eli me emme lähde mestaroimaan tai neuvomaan muita tässä. Me olemme valtavirrassa ja lähdimme pitkälti siitä, että toivoimme sanamuotoja, jotka vievät ja edistävät Ukrainan NATO-jäsenyyttä enemmän kuin Vilnan huippukokouksen sanamuodot. Ja tietysti muutamat maat olivat sitä mieltä, että pitää olla hyvin varovainen estämisen suuntaan, mutta kyllä mun mielestä se viesti tällä hetkellä on hirveän selkeä, eli Ukrainasta tulee NATO-jäsen. Ei nyt, mutta jossain vaiheessa. No varmaan suuri viesti tulee tämän deklaraation kautta ja se, että liittokunta seisoo vahvasti Ukrainan takana sekä taloudellisen että aseellisen tuen näkökulmasta, koordinoinnin näkökulmasta ja sitten loppupelissä myös siitä näkökulmasta, että Ukrainalle rakennetaan silta kohti NATO-jäsenyyttä. We'll take the last question in Finnish. Anteeksi? En ole vielä tuota uutista nähnyt tänä aamuna, joten en sitä sen enempää kommentoi. All right, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, really glad to be here to celebrate 75th anniversary of NATO. But this is not about the celebration, not only about the celebration. And we have to do more in order to strengthen our alliance, which is one of the most long-lasting and credible alliances in the world. As for me, as a president of Lithuania, it's very important that the decisions which were taken last year in Vilnius are in the stage of implementation. We need to do more, and we have to spend more, because Russia's war in Ukraine is further complicating the situation. The security situation in the region is deteriorating. Russia's economy is working full scale to service war machine. And what is important also, we have to take note about the role of Belarus, the neighboring country of Lithuania, because this country is fully available for all kinds of activities of Russian Federation in order to destabilize the situation at the border. Right now we know how complicated is the situation at the border with Poland because of illegal migration and hybrid attacks against Poland. Recently it was the case in other countries, in Latvia and Lithuania. So this is the reason why we have to spend more attention to the eastern flank of NATO. And the best instrument to do that is, of course, forward defense. Boots on the ground is the best deterrence factor in the eastern flank of NATO. I am really glad to say that we are very successfully working with our close ally Germany in deploying the full-size brigade in Lithuania, the process which will be completed in 2026. And this is a very good example and inspiration for our partners, for our allies to follow. For me, as a representative of eastern flank of NATO, it's very important that we go forward in increasing the defense spending, defense investments. It's very nice to see that our 2% club is expanding, but 2% as a threshold is not sufficient enough looking from our perspective, and Lithuania is committed to increase this defense spending up to 3% and in the coming years to do more. Very good that we spent the prior attention to the Ukraine, and I think this is very important that Ukraine receives positive signals comparing with Vilnius language of the last NATO summit. Irreversibility of the process is important. The bridge is important, but of course our friends, Ukrainians, expect more. And I hope that after the victory, there will be no question about full-fledged membership of Ukraine in NATO. So those are the issues which seem to be very important for us. And we, as I mentioned, we are glad to participate in this high-level summit and looking forward to cooperate with our allies in the future.
President Alzheimer, you mentioned the importance of Belarus as a Russian ally. In recent days, the Chinese troops have been training close to Polish borders, working with their Belarusian counterparts. Isn't that a sad indictment of the failure of NATO, the West, the EU, the United States to isolate Russia on the international stage with key players such as China?
Well, it's very important to see the efforts of Russia to involve other countries in this war against Ukraine. And you mentioned Belarus. I didn't mention one more important factor, the deployment of Russian nuclear tactical weapons in Belarus. According to our knowledge, this is a reality. So those are deliberate attempts of Russian Federation to complicate the situation at the border. And of course, the involvement of China and other countries is also a very important factor. We have to pay more attention to this. But so far, our diplomatic efforts did not bring a sufficient result in that regard. But it doesn't mean that we have to put more efforts in order to get a positive result in the future.
Could you elaborate a bit why the irreversibility for Ukraine towards NATO is necessary, and will we find the kind of language also in the summit?
Well, as you know, it was hard discussion in Vilnius how to send this positive signal to Ukraine, and I think we found good language in Vilnius summit, and probably there was limited room to improve this text in Washington, but I think it was the case. And irreversibility means that it's, first of all, this is a signal not to Ukraine so much itself, but to Russian Federation, that we are committed to go this way and to finalize it after the war is finished. I think this is improvement. If we are talking before the NATO summit in Washington that we have to find the formulas Vilnius plus language, I think we found it. I don't know how big is this improvement of the text, but that this is improvement, that is for sure. Well, I think This is important to understand, that we are different and our attitude to the war in Ukraine is different. But even knowing that some leaders have a little bit different position and attitude to this war, we still are able to find the consensus at the table, especially now having 32nd member of NATO at the table. We still are able to find necessary solutions, necessary wording in order to go forward. It's not so easy. I represent the country in the European Council. We have 27 members there. We have here even more members at the table, but we are still able to do that. And I think this is most important. Thank you. Yes. Žinote, visada galima kritikuoti bet kokį tekstą, tačiau man atrodo, kad svarbu yra tai, kad Vilniaus kalba ar Vilniaus retorika yra ne tik tai pakartota, bet ir pagerinta. Ir aš manau, kad tikrai reikia žiūrėti pozityviai į šitą būtent retoriką, kuri yra Vašingtone viršūnių susitikime, nes tai yra pozityvus signalas pirmiausia pačiai Ukrainai, kad procesas yra nestabdomas, kad procesas priklausys nuo tų reformų, kuriuos Ukraina įgyvendina dabar. Ir kad šitų reformų rezultate Ukraina taps ES nare ir NATO nare. Ir nemanau, kad tokioje tolimoje ateityje. Tai aš vis dėlto siūlyčiau žiūrėti į šį tekstą iš konstruktyviosios pusės, nors sutinku, kad galima kritikuoti bet kokį tekstą dėl to, kad jis galbūt nėra pakankamai ryžtingas ar nepakankamai stiprų signalą siunčia. Tiesiog tai yra šiandienos šios minutės konsensusas, kurį pasiekėme ir dėl to tą konsensusą turime branginti. Taip, aš manau, kad rotacinės oro gynybos sistema mums buvo labai svarbi nuo pat pradžių ir mes tikrai labai džiaugiamės, kad turėjome šito principo įgyvendinimą Vilniaus viršūnių susitikime. Tačiau lygiai taip pat puikiai supratome, kad jos įgyvendinimas nėra toks paprastas. Dėl dviejų priežasčių. Pirma, kad oro gynybos sistemų laisvų, kurias galėtų teikti mūsų aljanso nariai atskiroms valstybėms, ištekliai yra labai riboti dėl suprantamos priežasties, kadangi jų reikia Ukrainoje ir ko gero labiau netgi reikia Ukrainoje. Antra problema buvo ta, kad iš tikrųjų nebuvo labai aiškios sistemos, kaip atskiros šalis pildo tą oro gynybos sistemą, užtikrina tą rotacinį principą. Ir tai buvo daroma, tokių, sakyčiau, individualiomis pastangomis, kuomet prezidentai arba kiti valstybių vadovai važinėdavo ir prašydavo kitų sostinių suteikti vienokias ar kitokias sistemas. Tai, kad visa tai atsidurs po NATO stogu, koordinuojant NATO, yra labai gerai ir aš manau, kad tai suteiks daugiau, sakyčiau, postumio pozityvaus į priekį ir mes galėsime pilniau užpildyti ir įgyvendinti šitą principą, kurį, kaip minėjau, numatėme dar Vilniaus viršūnių susitikime. Ačiū.
It is my great honor that I lead Montenegro's delegation on this year's NATO Summit, especially so because we are commemorating 75 years since the North Atlantic Treaty was signed exactly here in Washington, D.C. in 1949. This is the most successful defense alliance in the history of the world, and Montenegro is very proud to be an allied country. We have 32 allied countries now. We are very committed to this alliance, and we are showing the unity more than ever, as evidenced by the 2% target, spending target, that this year we have record 23 member states reaching that target, and others soon to come. Montenegro is one of them, and Montenegro has been investing heavily this year in modernization and equipment. as evidenced by the 36% of our defense budget. We are ready to be committed. We are ready to be reliable, predictable, and a credible partner. Thank you.
Well, after more than 200 years of military non-alignment, I have the privilege of being at my very first NATO summit as a full-fledged NATO member of Sweden. And that is, of course, historic for us, but I do think we will add a few things to the alliance as well. Normally, when I'm asked what does Sweden bring to NATO, I normally answer we bring geography and we bring capacity. Geography for obvious reasons. Just look at the map in the Nordic region. Now, the full Nordic region is NATO land. That creates totally new possibilities for cooperation in our part of the world. The second is capacity. We have unique capacities in terms of military equipment, in terms of air defense, fighters, submarines, intelligence, radar, not least very well-trained, internationally trained soldiers. So I think we bring quite a few things also as assets to the alliance, together with our strong military defense industry. Finally, we are, since a few years, we are reaching the 2% target. We are heading towards 2.6% the coming years. And we are very strong supporters of the transatlantic cooperation in general and transatlantic cooperation to help Ukraine win this war. Thank you so much. Well, we support as strong language as is possible. We like to see Ukraine within the European Union, which they are heading towards, and we would like to see Ukraine also within NATO. Ukraina måste ju svara för Ukraina, men jag är övertygad om att Ukraina kommer se det starka stöd som finns från Ukraina, från hela NATO-familjen. Jag tror vi alla har enorm respekt för att Ukraina behöver mer av allt, vill ha mer av allt, har bråttom, allt med respekt för det. Jag tror också Ukraina förstår att det är ett långsiktigt och uthålligt stöd som de västliga demokratierna nu erbjuder Ukraina. Well, within the NATO framework, I don't have a message, but as an EU member, I do have a message, along with many other EU leaders. I think he should be careful not misusing the presidency for doing trips that could be considered or be looked upon as speaking for the whole of EU. I think that is a mistake, and I think Hungary now, they receive the reactions they actually have asked for. Please repeat that.
So many leaders massively weakened in the alliance.
Yeah. I think we do that by joint actions. I mean, we are democracies, and democracies have elections, and every leader knows that sometimes you win elections, sometimes you lose elections, but still, these countries are very stable NATO countries. I think we cultivate that unity and that stability very well together. We are, as you might know, we are part of the F-16 coalition, even though we don't use F-16 for obvious reasons. But we bring other capabilities within that coalition. Just a few weeks ago, we actually deployed or made a decision to deploy two other aircrafts, which actually increased the F-16 capabilities quite significantly through radar surveillance. So we do our part, but not right now with Gripen fighters. We don't exclude that possibility, But it is a bad idea to try to introduce two different aircraft systems at the same time. Oh. Sorry? Well, we hold that option open, and we still prepare for that option. I had a discussion with President Zelensky in Stockholm just a few weeks ago when we described that very carefully. Even still, I fully understand his constant willingness to receive more of everything, inclusive Gripen. And Gripen is as we know, a very good fighter. But right now, I think we do better use for them by deploying other kinds of material right now. Okay, thank you so much.
Good morning. I am honored to be here and grateful to President Biden for hosting this historic summit. And it was a great pleasure to be present at the commemoration at the Mellon Auditory yesterday. Now, it is always a great pleasure to visit the United States, where I did part of my university studies. But it is especially important and meaningful to come upon such an occasion. As the Prime Minister of Iceland, one of NATO's 12 founding nations, I am extremely happy to attend the first meeting where all the Nordics are present, with Sweden being attending with their leader for the first time after their membership was realized not so long ago. This is a historic point in time for the Nordics and creates a stronger platform for all of the Nordic countries to discuss and evaluate matters of importance in the North Atlantic and in our region of the world. Now, increased tensions in the world, and not least the illegal war that Russia is waging against Ukraine, puts this summit in a not so pleasant context, but it creates an environment under which we must come together and show that the alliance is stronger than ever, that we are willing to do more to strengthen our partnership, and Iceland will be and has been an increasing contributor to the NATO partnership. Thank you.
Bom, muito bom dia a todas e a todos. Eu quero, em primeiro lugar, agradecer em nome do Governo português a hospitalidade do Presidente Biden na realização desta importantíssima cimeira que assinala os 75 anos desta aliança e dizer que Portugal tem dois grandes objetivos nesta cimeira. Por um lado, assumir o seu compromisso de antecipar para 2029 alcançar um quantitativo de despesa no Orçamento do Estado equivalente a 2%, tendo para isso um plano credível que será, ou foi já formalizado através de uma carta que enviei ao Secretário-Geral da NATO e na qual estão também expressas as componentes que incorporam esse esforço. Desde logo a componente humana, de recrutamento e retenção de pessoal nas Forças Armadas Portuguesas e também o apoio a ex-combatentes. Por outro lado, a aquisição de equipamento variado, que vai desde viaturas de combate, de infantaria, a drones, a capacidade aérea e, finalmente, um dos grandes pontos onde temos colaborado e onde muita da despesa é assumida é a nossa participação em missões internacionais. Este esforço é um esforço que vai fazer com que a nossa atual despesa na área da saúde, que ronda os 4.186 milhões de euros, possa atingir cerca de 6 mil milhões de euros em 2029. O que estamos a falar, portanto, de um esforço acrescido correspondente a cerca de 400 milhões de euros por ano. Em segundo lugar, destacar o apoio incondicional de Portugal à Ucrânia. Tivemos ocasião, no passado mês de maio, de receber a visita do presidente Volodymyr Zelensky e assinar com a Ucrânia um acordo de cooperação militar para os próximos anos e quero também anunciar que dentro dessa componente de apoio vamos acrescentar ainda este ano 95 milhões de euros aos 126 que estavam precisamente previstos nesse texto. Será, portanto, um esforço na casa dos 221 milhões de euros que faremos este ano, mas é importante que, tal como acontece no investimento correspondente a 2% do nosso produto, quer como acontece especificamente no apoio militar à Ucrânia, nós estamos muito empenhados no Governo em fazer com que a nossa indústria de defesa, nas suas mais variadas dimensões, possa ser uma componente importante do contributo que nós vamos dar. Ou seja, que este dinheiro possa ser despendido na aquisição de material na nossa indústria de armamento, na nossa indústria de material militar, por exemplo, na área dos drones, na nossa indústria de componentes e até na nossa indústria têxtil para efeitos de fardamentos. É um esforço grande que é também completado com toda a nossa despesa ao nível do treino. Nós temos colaborado já com a Ucrânia nesse objetivo, por exemplo, num programa de formação para pilotar aeronaves F-16 e também incorpora um esforço grande no que diz respeito à assistência hospitalar, à assistência médica e à assistência técnica. Esta cimeira é uma cimeira importante para perspectivar os próximos tempos desta aliança, numa altura crucial em que é preciso restabelecer a paz e é preciso também olhar para todas as ameaças que pelo mundo fora, em especial no Sul, estão hoje mais visíveis através da intervenção de países extra-Aliança Atlântica. Sobre a questão específica que colocou, ela enquadra-se dentro da presidência deste semestre da União Europeia e, portanto, só nessa ocasião nos pronunciaremos sobre ela. Esta é uma aliança que se consubstancia no compromisso e o compromisso que nós vamos assumir nestes 2 dias é um compromisso muito forte para cumprir vários objetivos, nomeadamente de reforço de investimento, de reforço de apoio à Ucrânia e também de reforço da capacidade militar como um todo para ações preventivas e ações humanitárias. Tudo isso, naturalmente, depois de ficar acertado entre todos os Estados-membros, é pressuposto que possa corresponder a uma execução e é isso que nós esperamos de todos. Muito obrigado.
Tudi iz Slovenije. Danes smo na pomembnem zasedanju vrha NATO v Washingtonu in obetamo si, da bomo naredili pomemben premik naprej. Premik ni samo na investicijah v obrambo. Premik ni samo v tem, da Ukrajina dobi dodatna zagotovila, da ji bo NATO stal ob strani. Verjamem, da bo premik tudi v tem, da se NATO začne bolj obnašati tudi kot politična vojaška organizacija in na tem področju izvajati naslednje korake, ali na Evroatlantiku ali pa na Indo-Pacifiku. Jaz ne bi šel v detajle tega, kar se pričakuje danes, mislim, da bo za to še dovolj priložnosti. Bi pa rad povedal, da so pričakovanja velika in da glede na včerajšnje dogajanje so naši ameriški gostitelji več kot izpolnili pričakovanja nas, ki prihajamo iz Evrope. Glede tega, da je Ukrajina na poti proti NATO, ni nobenega dvoma. Nenazadnje ta proces traja že kar več kot desetletje. Vprašanje ni ali, vprašanje je kdaj. Razumem, da trenutek še ni napočil, pa vendar. Dajmo se pripravljati, kot da je to mogoče že lahko jutri. Tisto, kar je pomembno, je, da v tem vmesnem obdobju se vsi zavedamo svojih obveznosti, prispevamo krepiti svojega vojaškega proračuna, svoje obrambne sposobnosti in solidarno prispevamo skupaj z ostalimi članicami NATO, zavezništva, tudi pri prispevkih za Ukrajino. Številke danes še niso posebej razdeljene po državah, mi bomo prispevali solidarno svoj delež. Hvala lepa.
Good morning. Very important NATO summit here. As being said over the past days, NATO is stronger than ever, the most successful military alliance in history. That is because of two reasons. First reason, of course, is solidarity. 23 countries today who say that they will defend each other at whenever moment that is necessary. But besides solidarity, it's also the capacity to adapt. In the world of today, NATO needs to adapt itself. In the course of the past 75 years, NATO has adapted multiple times, and we see that today there are, and internally and externally, forces that challenge NATO, that challenge its effectiveness. And this summit today, the most important outcome of the summit today is showing how NATO is going to adapt in a new world where we are being put under pressure. From the Belgium side, extremely happy with the bilateral security agreement that we had with Ukraine. Belgium will be the biggest donor of fighter jets to Ukraine. In total, 30 F-16s will be donated to Ukraine in the next years. And we are doing everything to make sure that within the year of 2024, first Belgian F-16s will be donated to Ukraine. Besides that, of course, our support is broad. We've also done a lot of effort in leveraging the frozen Russian assets, of which a big part are in Belgium, and to make sure that they are being used to support Ukraine in defending itself and in reconstructing Ukraine. Thank you. Well, let's listen around the table the positions that are being put, but I think it's quite clear that Ukraine becoming part of NATO is not a question if, it's a question when. They will be part of NATO at the right moment when the right reforms are being put, and from my perspective, indeed, it is irreversible that Ukraine will be part of NATO at some point. So the decision of the past Belgian government is that the F-16s will be used by Ukrainian pilots and will be used above Ukrainian territory. That is actually the need today, being able to have air superiority above Ukraine and developing the air defense capacities. That's the most urgent need today. As I just said, the delivery of 30 F-16s is really something that helps Ukraine in building a full-fledged air force, and Belgium will be the biggest contributor to that. So the current restrictions that we put, it is that is utilization above the ground, above the territory of Ukraine. No, I think the signal is stronger than ever. Moscow expected NATO to be weaker. Today, NATO is stronger than ever. More than ever, countries are increasing their investment in the military. NATO is larger than ever. NATO is more united than ever. Now, that's how democracy works. In European and American democracy, there is transitions. There is some different parties who take over. That's not how it works in other parts of the world. That's not how it works in an autocracy such as Russia, for example. But that you have political shifts, I think it's something we should embrace and not see as a weakness. Thank you. Yeah, of course, we're looking at elections throughout the world, and the American election is a very important one. But let's be extremely clear, it's the American citizens who will make their choice. And that choice is a choice that you will respect if, of course, the rules of democracy are being followed. And we will work together. And from anything I hear, NATO will come out of any election stronger than it is today. Thank you. Yeah, you do? Wait, let me first do the Belgian press a bit. Yes. We hebben de communicatie van Audi Brussel gezien de voorbije dagen. Zoals u weet heeft de vorige regering en de ontslagnemende regering een aantal stappen gezet om duidelijk te maken welke de mogelijkheden voor Audi zijn in Brussel. En ik zal nu maandag samen met formateur Bart de Wever de directie van Audi ontvangen om van hen tekst en uitleg te krijgen en om hen duidelijk te maken welke de mogelijkheden zijn in Brussel. Wij zullen er alles aan doen om een maximaal aantal jobs bij Audi in Brussel te kunnen behouden. En dus samen met formateur De Wever zal ik de directie en de vakbonden van Audi ontvangen nu maandag. Maar we zien dat de steun aan Oekraïne dat die sterker is dan ooit. Dat de mogelijkheid voor Oekraïne om toe te treden tot de NAVO, dat we elke keer een stap vooruit zetten. En ik hoor ook dat een aantal landen heel concrete voorstellen van militaire steun hier gaan aankondigen, vooral op het gebied van luchtverdediging. En dat is natuurlijk zeer sterk nodig. Ik denk dat dat een goede zaak is. Een aantal weken geleden heeft België een zeer belangrijke aankondiging gedaan, dat 30 F-16's zullen aan Oekraïne geschonken worden, waarvan een aantal nog dit jaar. Hiermee worden wij de grootste leverancier van gevechtsvliegtuigen voor de Oekraïnse luchtmacht. Dat is iets wat zeer sterk gewaardeerd wordt, maar ik hoor dat er nog bijkomende aankondigingen zullen gedaan worden vandaag en dat is een goede zaak. Oké, thank you. This is Belgium, I have to do it in French as well. Oui, allez-y. Je n'ai pas les détails, mais j'ai vu aussi en effet que le Danemark et les Pays-Bas vont annoncer que les premiers F-16 vont être livrés maintenant. C'est une bonne chose et c'est aussi grâce à la coalition dont la Belgique fait part, parce que les F-16 seront livrés parce qu'il y aura le personnel qui peut faire la maintenance et parce qu'il y aura les pilotes et la formation des pilotes, elle s'est faite largement dans des F-16 belges, dans des missions d'entraînement qui ont eu lieu par exemple au Danemark. Donc je pense que c'est vraiment un succès pour toute cette coalition F-16. Comme j'ai dit, coalition F-16 qui naturellement deviendra plus grande avec l'annonce de livraison de 30 F-16 du côté belge. Soyons clairs, les démarches de M. Orban ne représentent pas le Conseil européen. Sont une action qui n'était pas coordonnée avec d'autres pays et ses opinions et ses actions ne représentent pas l'ensemble des 27 pays européens. Et donc, voilà, il le fait dans sa personne unique hongroise, mais pas dans sa fonction de présidence rotative du Conseil européen. Oops, last one and then, oui. Donc, on a vu les annonces de la direction d'Audi et donc ensemble avec le formateur Bart de Wever, je vais recevoir et les syndicats et la direction d'Audi maintenant lundi pour leur demander plus d'explications et pour regarder ce qu'on peut faire pour garder un maximum d'emplois en Belgique. Cette task force s'est réunie avant, une letter of intent a été faite. Je pense que c'est important maintenant d'écouter quelle est l'action d'Audi, de regarder ce qu'on peut faire et je le ferai donc ensemble avec formateur de Wever à partir de lundi. Well, I met President Biden in the White House a bit more than 1 month ago. I think we had an extremely good discussion, very clear on our objectives as Americans and Europeans working together. We talked, for example, about the frozen assets, where Belgium is playing a leading role. We had an extremely rich discussion. Just as yesterday, I think he had an extremely strong statement that he gave to NATO and to the rest of the world. Thank you. I have to give space to my Luxembourg colleague now.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important summit for NATO. You know, we live in a world that is marked by geopolitical divisions, and we have a war on the European soil. And therefore, while some of the leaders some years ago considered that NATO was not anymore the place to be or the organization that we need, I can tell you that for my country, Luxembourg, NATO has always been a guarantee for peace, for democracy, for rule of law, and that is even more the case today. For a very long time, we thought in Europe that peace, democracy, rule of law was guaranteed forever, and it didn't have to take so much care about defense anymore. That has, of course, dramatically changed by the general geopolitical divisions, but also by the unacceptable, brutal war of aggression by Russia in Ukraine. And therefore, I think this summit here is important for all of us to come together to say that we are united, and that is also why I will announce today at this summit that my country has decided under the new government that I'm leading that we will come to the 2% benchmark of defense spending by 2030. Luxembourg does not have a huge defense industry, so this will be money that goes to other countries, but we believe that solidarity has a price, because if we don't do this, if we don't spend more money on defense, the price afterwards will be much higher. So for us, a smaller country in Europe, we need to have a strong transatlantic alliance. We believe in solidarity with our partners to share common values, and that is why this summit today is important to reaffirm all those values. At the same time, I'm pleased to inform you that this morning I signed also a security agreement with President Zelensky of Ukraine. It is important that all nations support Ukraine, because what's going on in Ukraine is much more than defending the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. It is about a rules-based international order. It is about a world where borders cannot be changed by force, and especially for smaller countries, that is a guarantee for survival in a difficult environment. And that's why NATO for us is a very important institution for the years to come. Thank you.
We're meeting here in Washington to celebrate the 75th anniversary since the establishment of the world's most successful and most resilient defensive alliance. We're meeting at a time of grave challenges, at a time when there is a war raging in the heartland of Europe. We're meeting at a time when we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes in order to ensure that Russia does not win this war of unprovoked aggression. This is a time when the NATO alliance needs to address a series of complicated global challenges. And this is also a time when we need to reconfirm our steadfast commitment to spend at least 2% of our GDP on defense expenditure. This is particularly important for European countries, not only to meet this target, but also to streamline our defense spending in order to further strengthen the NATO alliance. I have been a steadfast advocate of more integration in European spending. We don't just need to spend more, we also need to be smarter about how we allocate funds in order to increase our collective defense. And strengthening our European defense capabilities is complementary to NATO's defense posture. It strengthens NATO, and that is why we need to use the next European cycle to focus more on how we bolster our European defense. It is in our interest to do so. We're not going to comment on this topic. You know, there are elections coming up in the United States, and we will, of course, respect the decision of the American people. Personally, I've worked both with President Trump and with President Biden. What is of particular interest to us is to ensure that we maintain this very strong transatlantic bond, which has always been at the heart of the alliance.
И аз сигурно няма да ви изненадам, като ще кажа, че позицията ще бъде тази, която е утвърдена от Министерски съвет, разработена от Министерство на външните работи и от Министерство на отбраната. Това са общо взето темите. От най-глобалната тема всъщност е как НАТО да стане по-силен, залагайки на колективното, но освен на колективното, за да се стигне до колективната сила, трябва да бъде и всяка една страна членка да бъде и нейната отбрана усилена, така че това е най-глобалното. Естествено, темата Украина, как трябва да се покаже подкрепа за Украина, каквато ние всъщност показваме от началото на войната, и няма нищо неестествено от това, тъй като за всеки е ясно, че едната страна Русия е агресор, а другата страна Украина е жертва. Съгласно международното право, всяка държава има право на независимост, неутралитет и териториална цялост, така че и нашата помощ, говоря вече за Алианса, помощта на Алианса като цяло е базирана на международното право и всички документи на Организацията на Обединените нации, като устав, харта и така нататък. И съответно българската позиция е същата, каквато и на Алианса като цяло, още повече, че тя е утвърдена и с 7 решения на Народното събрание. Така че това е позицията, която ние специално ще застъпим и ще утвърждаваме. А ние с президента на Украина сме се срещали на множество форуми напоследък, като започнете от Германия, Швейцария, имахме се срещи. На последния Европейски съвет също беше президента Зеленски, така че много срещи има. Естествено, че и тук ще се срещнем с него, но и той знае, че може да разчита на България като поддръжник на Украйна в тази справедлива за Украйна битка, да я нарека. То си е ясно, че е война, така че може да разчита Украйна на нас. Такива са и решенията, които са взети пак ще повторя, от парламента на България и съответно ние ги прилагаме и провеждаме външна политика, която е в съответствие с тези решения. Вчера с президента Байден успяхме да разменим няколко думи и те са обаче достатъчни. Ние потвърдихме, че сме надежден и лоялен партньор, не партньор, съюзник в НАТО. А пък от своя страна президента Байден каза, че имаме много ключова роля на източния фланг на Алианса. Впрочем, той ни спомена поименно, ако забелязахте, и в речта си. Така че това е признание. Общо взето това ни бяха разговорите с него. Няма как много дълги разговори да се водите, разбирате, защото той на всички трябва да обърне някакво внимание. Но мисля, че това, което споделихме помежду си, е достатъчно съществено като тема и признание за нас като член в Северноатлантическия блок. Аз с него най-много разговарях в интерес на истината и даже говорихме, че трябва да се намали напрежението той е след мен на опашката, така че ще го чуете и той какво ще каже. Направихме си снимка, ще я пуснем и нея, но говорихме и на едно мнение бяхме, че трябва да се намали напрежението в говоренето. Поне тъй като знаете, че обикновено между гражданите, между народите на две особено съседски страни няма напрежение и политиците, ако не помагат да се развиват по-добре, поне не трябва да пречат. Това е мое разбиране по принцип, а най-добре е да помага. Така или иначе вчера говорихме, че трябва да се нормализират отношенията и да се върнат в онова русло, което беше в 2017 година, когато беше подписан договор за добросъседство. И двамата бяхме на това мнение, пък да видим какво ще се получи, но няма нищо по-добро от хубави, добри отношения между съседи, че даже ние може да се каже, че сме и повече от съседи с Република Северна Македония. Трябва да се развие икономиката, ако сътрудничеството е на задоволително ниво, трябва да започнем да развиваме свързаността във всичките ѝ аспекти, транспортна, икономическа и така. Не сме отстъпвали, обаче казал съм, че трябва да се спазват и изискванията, които са поели. Не говоря даже само за Република Северна Македония, а въобще за всички страни от Западните Балкани. Виждате, че не ги отделяме пред скоба. Нашата позиция е европейската такава, която е общо европейска позиция, че всички държави кандидати за членове на Европейския съюз трябва да спазват изискванията, които са към всички. Благодаря.
Благодарам на прашањето. За нас представува посебна чест и задоволство да се биде во друштво на овие луѓе. Заедно со нив да го одбележиме овој јубилеј, 75 години од постоењето на НАТО алијансата, најголемата одбранбена алијанса во светската историја. Како држава подготвени сме да го додадеме својот придонес на сето она што представува вредност. Тука сме заедно со нашите сојузници да ја потврдиме нашата посветеност, како и до сега, така и во иднина, дека ќе го промовираме мирот, стабилноста и владењето на меѓународното право. Како малубрен народ, сакаме да потврдиме дека она кое што за нас е важно е да во деновите кои што овде ќе разговараме за важните прашања ги донесеме најзначајните одлуки кои што ќе моделираат иднината на човештвото во следните декади. И ние ќе го дадеме својот придонес. Македонија како држава има намера да продолжи на тој начин да функционира и да ги промовира вредностите. Како македонска влада сакаме да бидеме рамо до рамо со нашите сојузници и да го потврдиме слободарскиот дух на македонскиот народ и на македонските граѓани. Она кое што исто така сакам да го потврдам е дека остануваме посветени на исполнување на обврските, односно минимум 2% од бруто домашниот производ да бидат инвестирани во модернизација на нашата армија, нешто кое што е многу важно, затоа што само на тој начин ќе ги следиме современите чекори и ќе следиме најголемата светска одбрамбена алијанса која што некогаш постоела. Благодарам. Кој имате прашање, повелете. Благодарам.
Good morning. I am Congressman Jerry Conley, and I am serving as the president of NATO's Parliamentary Assembly, which is the legislative arm of NATO. And delighted to be here at the summit in very hot weather here in Washington. I will be addressing the summit shortly. I think I'm kicking off the summit actually in my remarks. And I wanted to just give you a quick preview of what it is we want to say on behalf of the parliamentarians of NATO. We want to absolutely assert solidarity with respect to Ukraine's struggle against a depraved sociopath, Vladimir Putin. And if we needed to be reminded of that, we certainly saw that in the wanton attack on a children's hospital earlier this week. We must win this struggle. It's not just about Ukrainian sovereignty, though it is about that. And it's not just about territory, though it is about that. It is the dialectic, the struggle between free peoples and democratic societies and democratic values and the authoritarian model that suppresses the human spirit in almost all aspects of life. And secondly, we believe that after 75 years, NATO must create architecture beyond a verbal commitment to democratic structures and values. And we want to create a Center for Democratic Resilience in NATO headquarters itself, because we believe it's time for NATO to, as NATO, be a proponent of, advocate for, resource for, and defender of democratic societies and norms and values. We believe that that's really important for our own existing membership, for our partners all around the world, and for aspirants who are desirous of being NATO members. And so that's our top legislative priority for the summit, and reaffirming our support for Ukraine until Ukraine prevails in the struggle with Russia is, of course, paramount as well. Thank you so much for having me here today, and have a great summit.
Very good morning. It's great to be here in Washington to celebrate 75th anniversary of the alliance. I'm very confident that we are going to decide today and tomorrow on a very substantial support package for Ukraine. I do believe that allies need to step up all the efforts. I also believe that we need to discuss, frankly, also the need to allow Ukrainians to use all the weapons without any restrictions. Another topic that is very important for all allies is defense spending and burden sharing. Latvia is, at this point, spending 3% of GDP. Not everyone is still up to 2%, but I do believe that the current geopolitical situation warrants the discussion and also decisions and also the implementation of those decisions to step up to 2%, but actually our goal needs to be at some point already more than that, at least 2.5%. And of course, my country, being the eastern flank member state, looks forward to have a substantial discussion about strengthening defenses, especially air defense. We are very grateful to those allies that are currently serving in Latvia. We see that implementation of Madrid and Vilnius summit decisions are going well. But of course, there are always things to discuss and also to get further elaborated. And finally, I'm also very happy that we are going to have a meeting with our Indo-Pacific partners, because let's face it, the security is indivisible, and we are very grateful to Ukrainian policy of those partners, but we also understand that we need to address concerns of Indo-Pacific partners. Thank you. Sorry? I do believe that we are going to agree on irreversible path of Ukraine to NATO. I do believe that we are not going to see any drama here. But of course, the big issue is that when this meeting ends, when declaration is adopted, is how practically we are going to support Ukraine, how practically we are going to implement that irreversibility, that bridging, that whatever is going to be put in the final version of the statement. Ka viss tas, ko mēs šobrīd vēlamies redzēt saistībā ar pretgaisa aizsardzību, gaisa aizsardzības stiprināšanu, saistībā ar papildus nepieciešamajiem lēmumiem, lai stiprinātu mūsu drošību, ka tas arī būs. Man ir diezgan liela pārliecība, ka šeit mūs gaida labi lēmumi. Es domāju, ka kopš 2014. gada un sevišķi 2022. gada kontekstā, tad, kad Krievija sāka pilna mēroga agresiju pret Ukrainu, nevienam jau nav īpašu ilūziju vai neviens īpaši nelolo lielas cerības uz to, ka Krievija pēkšņi kaut kādā brīdī var pārtraukt to politiku, to agresiju, ko tā ir darījusi. Tādēļ visa šī diskusija varbūt, kas ir ļoti būtiska ar diplomātiskām niansēm, protams, ir svarīga, bet runājot ar sabiedroto līderiem, līdz šim es redzu pilnīgu pārliecību, pilnīgu izpratni par to, kas ir Krievija. Tas, ka varbūt kādam gribās kaut kādas nianses īpaši slikt, tas ir šāda veida samitu, šāda veida diskusiju neatņemama sastāvdaļa. Thank you.
I just had a very good meeting with President Zelensky where I made it absolutely clear that as far as the UK is concerned, the change of government makes no difference to the support that we will provide. We've been united on this when we were in opposition, and it was really important to me to be able to affirm that face-to-face in the meeting. I did speak to him immediately after I was sworn in as Prime Minister last week. And so we build on that here at NATO at this important summit, because it is an opportunity for our Labour government to reaffirm our commitment to NATO. We obviously signed the original treaty way back. We reaffirm today, but also to discuss with President Zelensky what further support that he needs, and to use our opportunity here with our allies to make sure that that support is agreed, and to reinforce, in a sense as a message to Putin, the resolve of NATO, bigger now than it's ever been, more united than it's ever been, and absolutely clear-eyed about the threat of Russian aggression. Very good bilateral meetings that we've had an opportunity to make sure that those relationships are reset, for me to be able to say that our position on the world stage, leading on issues like defence and security, on climate change and on energy are so important. So a really good opportunity. But now we go on and do the work in Council.
Finally, you're looking forward to your trips to White House?
I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. If you allowed me, I will speak to our Slovak media, please. Pre Slovensko je kľúčové ako člena východného krídla NATO, aby bola posilnená protizdušná obrana východného krídla ako takého. Samozrejme vítam rozhodnutie pána prezidenta Bidena posilniť vzdušnú obranu ukrajinského vzdušného priestoru aj vo vzťahu k nedávnym vážnym útokom zo strany Ruska na území Ukrajiny a k tragédiám, ktoré za posledné dni nastali aj v oblasti civilných obetí. Na druhej strane budem dnes ale na samite a aj na Public Fore hovoriť o tom, aké sú kapacity obranného priemyslu Spojených štátov a Európy ako takej, aby sme vôbec naše plány o celkovej ochrane nášho východného krídla protizdušnou obranou boli schopní realizovať. Pretože ďalších niekoľko kusov protizdušnej obrany na Ukrajinu znamená, že nebude ich dostatok pre členské krajiny NATO a Slovensko pravdepodobne naďalej zostane bez efektívnej ochrany vzdušného priestoru a priemysel a kapacity európskeho obranného priemyslu nedávajú nádej, že sa z krátkodobého hľadiska dá to potrebné množstvo techniky nejakým spôsobom aj vyrobiť a dodať. Takže na jednej strane vítam rozhodnutie pána prezidenta, je to momentálne veľmi dôležité pre obyvateľov Ukrajiny. Na druhej strane ale to spôsobí podľa mňa ďalší nedostatok a oneskorenie dodávok smerom aj na východné krídlo NATO. Opakujem, Slovensko je bez ochrany vzdušného priestoru a je to pre nás kľúčová otázka, o ktorej dnes budem na samite hovoriť. Ak budeme hovoriť o záveroch, tak chcem potvrdiť, že Slovensko sa zúčastní na celkovom finančnom balíku, ktorý pod gesciou NATO bude pripravený pre Ukrajinu. Slovensko si započíta tieto výdavky do svojich 2% výdavkov na obranu. Započítajú sa do toho výdavky Slovenskej republiky alebo Ministerstva obrany. A zároveň, ak hovoríme o členstve Ukrajiny v NATO a toho finálneho textu, ktorý tu je pozícia Slovenskej republiky nemenná. Slovensko podporuje maximálne integračné úsilie Ukrajiny do Európskej únie a poskytne všetko svoje know-how pri reformách a tak ďalej. Na druhej strane ale trváme na texte, ktorý hovorí o budúcom členstve NATO Ukrajiny, že momentálne je možné túto otázku otvoriť, až keď bude na Ukrajine mier a nebude prebiehať vojnový konflikt. A aj to vždy do budúcna za podmienok, tak ako hovorí zmluva, ak budú splnené podmienky, ak sa na tom zhodnú všetky členské krajiny Severoatlantickej aliancie. Musím povedať skôr opačné. Keby skolabovala Ukrajina, je to veľmi nepríjemná situácia aj pre nás a celé východné krídlo NATO. Na druhej strane ale hovoriť dnes o členstve Ukrajiny v NATO je predčasné a za týchto vojenských podmienok ani nemožné. Hovorí to zmluva a preto ten postoj Slovenskej republiky treba vnímať, že je veľmi pragmatický, veľmi realistický a odráža skutočnú realitu. Slovensko nerobí politiku veľkých prehlásení a hollywoodských gest, ale hovorí o tom, čo sa reálne dá alebo nedá urobiť. A v tomto prípade členstvo NATO pre Ukrajinu je možno nejaký vzdialený cieľ alebo aj nejaká žiadosť samotnej Ukrajiny, ale tá skutočná realizácia je ešte veľmi, veľmi ďaleko od nás a bude závisieť od rozhodnutia všetkých členských krajín NATO. Nie je to len na rozhodnutí samotnej Ukrajiny. Zdá sa, že je definitívna zhoda. Slovenskej republike vyhovuje text, ktorý hovorí práve v časti vstupu Ukrajiny do NATO, potenciálneho vstupu, že sa tak môže stať niekedy v budúcnosti za splnení všetkých podmienok a len za všeobecného súhlasu všetkých členov členských krajín NATO. Okay, thank you very much. look, we are satisfied now with the conclusions, how they are prepared for our debate today. Of course, for us it's crucial that there is mentioned that if all the conditions are fulfilled and all member states agreed, of course, like it is in the treaty. Thank you very much.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Witam bardzo serdecznie. Jak Państwo widzicie, rozpoczynamy drugi dzień jubileuszowego szczytu Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego w Waszyngtonie. Wczoraj mieliśmy uroczystą inaugurację, a zarazem uroczyste obchody tego 75-lecia z naszego polskiego punktu widzenia także, a może przede wszystkim 25-lecia także i naszej obecności w Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckim. Bardzo ważny moment. Ten szczyt ma istotne znaczenie dla umocnienia więzi sojuszniczej, dla pokazania całemu światu, że jesteśmy razem, stoimy twardo, oprzemy się każdemu niebezpieczeństwu. NATO jest sojuszem obronnym. Podkreślić to bardzo mocno chcę i z całą pewnością szczyt także będzie to podkreślał. Nikogo nie atakuje, ale będzie bronił każdej piędzi ziemi Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, a więc każdego państwa, które do Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego należy, przed wszelkimi zagrożeniami. Dzisiaj tym największym zagrożeniem, bez wątpienia, w szczególności my to obserwujemy w Europie, na wschodniej flance Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, jest Rosja, która napadła na Ukrainę bez żadnego uzasadnienia, prowadzi agresję przeciwko temu suwerennemu, niepodległemu państwu już od 2,5 roku. Ukraina jest wspierana w tych działaniach obronnych przez państwa Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego. Mam nadzieję, że ten szczyt NATO tutaj w Waszyngtonie, jubileuszowy szczyt NATO, wyśle wyraźny sygnał, po pierwsze o tym, że droga Ukrainy do NATO jest nieodwracalna, w tym znaczeniu, że w istocie NATO jest gotowe przyjąć Ukrainę w swoje szeregi, a decyzja w istocie przede wszystkim należy do ukraińskiego społeczeństwa, które musi tego chcieć. Ale nikt z zewnątrz nie może tego zablokować. Nikt poza państwami NATO, które decydują o przyjęciu kolejnego państwa do Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, i społeczeństwem tego państwa, które demokratycznie decyduje o kierunkach polityki państwowej, nie może w tych sprawach decydować. Nikt z zewnątrz nie ma na ten temat nic do powiedzenia i nie może się tutaj skutecznie wtrącić. To jest bardzo ważny message, który mam nadzieję, że ten szczyt Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, jeżeli chodzi o Ukrainę, wyśle. Poza tym nowe formy wsparcia i budowania relacji pomiędzy Sojuszem Północnoatlantyckim a Ukrainą, budowania partnerstwa, które stanowi tą drogę Ukrainy do NATO, czyli w szczególności stworzenie centrów koordynacji, centrów treningowych. Dzisiaj takie centrum jest budowane także w Polsce, w Bydgoszczy, nazywamy je w skrócie JTEC, wspólne ukraińsko-natowskie centrum analiz, szkolenia i edukacji, w którym będą szkoleni ukraińscy żołnierze. Będzie także wymiana doświadczeń pomiędzy ukraińskimi żołnierzami a ekspertami z NATO co do strategii, co do metod stosowanych na polu walki, także przez rosyjskiego agresora, więc to będzie takie budowanie, można powiedzieć, wspólnych zdolności obronnych przez Ukrainę i NATO razem w ramach tego centrum i wielkie centrum w Wiesbaden w Niemczech, które będzie realizowało zadania koordynujące związane ze wsparciem dla Ukrainy właściwie na wszystkich polach, jeżeli chodzi o obronę przed rosyjską agresją. Mam nadzieję, proszę Państwa, że będzie mowa też o tym, co dla przedstawicieli Ukrainy kluczowe, dla prezydenta Wołodymyra Zełenskiego. Ja rozmawiałem z Wołodymyrem Zełenskim 2 dni temu w Warszawie, długo, bo w drodze na szczyt NATO odwiedził nas, jak Państwo wiecie, a mianowicie formalne zaproszenie Ukrainy do NATO. Ten szczyt tego zaproszenia najprawdopodobniej nie wyślę, ale mam nadzieję i będę o tym mówił też w swoich wystąpieniach, że stanie się ono faktem już na kolejnym szczycie Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, który będzie w Hadze. Tu w każdym razie, proszę Państwa, umocnienie jedności, budowanie zdolności obronnych Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego w zakresie obrony przeciwlotniczej, obrony przeciwrakietowej, umacniania wschodniej flanki, realizacji planów regionalnych, wypełnienia ich w 100% i budowania nowych zdolności także w zakresie współpracy z Ukrainą. To są te najważniejsze elementy i decyzji, i przekazu, który chcielibyśmy, żeby popłynął z tego szczytu Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, ale przede wszystkim jedność, odporność i gotowość. To jest najważniejsze, żeby szczyt NATO umacniał bezpieczeństwo państw NATO. To ma znaczenie kluczowe także dla nas, Polaków, którzy, powtarzam jeszcze raz, nie tylko świętujemy 75-lecie Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, ale także 25-lecie w tym roku naszej przynależności do tej wielkiej wspólnoty bezpieczeństwa i obrony przed wszelką agresją.
Jego słowa, że Ukraina może powstrzymać i powstrzyma Putina. Czy po tym szczycie Ukraina ma szansę na kolejną pomoc, która może rzeczywiście urealnić te słowa?
Przede wszystkim bardzo się cieszę zarówno z wystąpień pana prezydenta Joe Bidena, bardzo twardego, bardzo mocnego, z bardzo jasnym przekazem, co chcę podkreślić, właśnie ten fragment mówiący o tym, że Ukraina de facto pokona Rosję w tym znaczeniu, że oprze się Rosji, że Rosja nie zwycięży, miało najistotniejsze znaczenie, bo to jest także informacja co do przyszłości polityki, zarówno amerykańskiej, jak i tej, którą Stany Zjednoczone będą chciały realizować w ramach sojuszu, czyli wspieranie Ukrainy na wszelkich polach, a przede wszystkim niedopuszczenie do tego, by Ukraina w tej wojnie uległa Rosji. To jest ze strony najsilniejszego mocarstwa stanowiącego trzon Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego bardzo ważna informacja od głowy państwa, która została wczoraj wysłana w świat. I to, co powiedział sekretarz generalny Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego Jens Stoltenberg w swoim wystąpieniu, że nie możemy dopuścić do tego, żeby Rosja wygrała tę wojnę. To jest drugi niezwykle ważny element przekazu. We cannot let Russia win this war. To był ten bardzo ważny moment. Te dwa wystąpienia, można powiedzieć, pod tym względem absolutnie się zgrały i stanowiły taki wspólny przekaz dla całego świata.
So many leaders domestically weakened within the alliance. How does this summit want to send a strong signal to Moscow?
The strong signal to Moscow is unity of a transatlantic alliance and the readiness, and that we strengthen our military capabilities. This is the strong message, that we will support, that we send the military equipment together to Ukraine to help Ukraine stop Russian aggression, do not let Russia win this war. This is the main message to Russia.
Czy jest na to zgoda wszystkich członków NATO, żeby ta decyzja, jeśli chodzi o Ukrainę, to rzeczywiście była nieodwracalna?
Proszę Państwa, dyskusja jest właściwie tylko wokół tego momentu, w którym Ukraina będzie przyjęta do Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, a nie na temat samego faktu, czy Ukraina powinna być przyjęta do NATO, czy nie. Bo o tym wszyscy doskonale wiedzą, że tak naprawdę szanuje się tutaj decyzję społeczeństwa ukraińskiego. To oni wyznaczają kierunek, w którym chcą, żeby podążało ich państwo. Czy ono ma podążać ku wschodowi, czy ono ma podążać ku wspólnocie wolnego Zachodu. Dzisiaj ten głos społeczeństwa Ukrainy jest jasny i wyraźny. Chcą przynależeć do wspólnoty Zachodu, a wspólnota Zachodu wysyła bardzo wyraźny sygnał do Ukrainy, że jest na tą przynależność otwarta, jest na tą przynależność gotowa. Dzisiaj jest tylko jeden problem, a mianowicie to, że wojna musi się zakończyć, bo Ukraina ma zostać przyjęta do NATO na wszystkich pełnych prawach, tak jak każde inne państwo członkowskie, po prostu jako zwykły członek Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, a to oznacza, że będzie wobec Ukrainy obowiązywał artykuł 5, czyli obowiązek kolektywnej obrony. No dzisiaj, kiedy wojna trwa, oznaczałoby to automatyczne włączenie się NATO do wojny przeciwko Rosji, a tego z kolei nikt nie chce, bo NATO wspiera Ukrainę, NATO będzie wspierało Ukrainę, ale NATO nie chce prowadzić wojny z Rosją. W związku z powyższym jest otwarta ta droga Ukrainy do Sojuszu Północnoatlantyckiego, ale jest dyskusja na temat momentu, w którym kolejne kroki powinny zostać na tej drodze dokonywane. Yesterday I talked with President Biden, and there is no doubt that everything is okay.
What do you make of the political conversation taking place in Washington around whether he continues as the nominee in the election? Obviously, President Zelensky mentioned yesterday that Russia, that the entire world will be watching.
You know, this is the decision of the President Biden and his family.
Kingdom is one of the founding members of our alliance, but not only that, the United Kingdom was one of the driving forces for the creation of NATO back in 1949. You are a staunch and important NATO ally. The United Kingdom spends more than 2% of GDP on defense, and I welcome your ambition to move to 2.5%. And I also, of course, recognize the great importance of the United Kingdom when it comes to strengthening NATO's deterrence and defense. Your jets patrols NATO skies, your ships patrols NATO seas, and you have British troops deployed on the eastern flank of our alliance. And you are also among those who are providing the most support to Ukraine. You started very early, back in 2014, and the support from the United Kingdom really makes a difference. Also welcome your clear statement of providing £3 billion yearly to Ukraine. That really makes a difference and something which is very much welcomed. At this summit, Ukraine will be one of the main issues. We will agree a substantial package for Ukraine, where NATO will play a bigger role in coordinating and providing security assistance and training. We will step up our cooperation with our Indo-Pacific partners, and of course we'll make important decisions on the deterrence and defense, and also recognizing the progress allies are making when it comes to increasing defense spending. So once again, it's great to have you here. Welcome, and great to see you at the NATO Summit.
Thank you very much for those warm words, and thank you for your congratulations. We are very pleased to be here so early on in the administration of the Labour government of 2024, reaffirming our unshakable support for NATO. We are very proud of the fact that we were a founding member of NATO, and that if you go to Brussels to your headquarters and look at the original treaty, you see the signature of our Labour Secretary of State on that document. And the ambition And the purpose then is as important now as it was then, as we face a very volatile world. Ukraine, obviously absolutely central to that. I'm pleased that we played a leading part in NATO, a unique part in NATO in Europe at least, and that we played a leading part in support for Ukraine, much needed. And we are looking forward to the opportunity at this summit to work with others and our allies to make sure that we send a very clear message, I think, of the resolve of a NATO which is bigger and stronger and more united, I think, than ever before, of our resolve to stand up to aggression, Russian aggression, but aggression in any form that we find it that threatens our values. And so it's very important to be here. Can I also just say a huge thanks to you for your incredible service to NATO. It has been inspirational, and it will be very hard for others to follow in your footsteps. But we are all deeply grateful for what you have done on a personal level for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
His Excellency Dr. Robert Golob, Prime Minister. Werner Johannes, President of Romania. His Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
His Excellency, Mr. Alexander Stubb, President of the Republic of Finland. His Excellency, Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic. His Excellency, Mr. Jonas Gahr Støre, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway. His Excellency, Mr. Luis Montenegro, Prime Minister of the Portuguese Republic. His Excellency, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. Son Excellence, Monsieur Luc Frieden, Premier ministre du Grand-Duché de Luxembourg. Her Excellency, Ms. Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Denmark. Her Excellency, Ms. Giorgia Meloni, President of the Council of Ministers of the Italian Republic. His Excellency, Mr. Petr Pavel, President of the Czech Republic. His Excellency, Mr. Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany. His Excellency, Mr. Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania. His Excellency, Mr. Miljko Spajic, Prime Minister of Montenegro. His Excellency, Mr. Edgars Rinkevič, President of the Republic of Latvia. His Excellency, Mr. Peter Pellegrini, President of the Slovak Republic. His Excellency, Mr. Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland. His Excellency, Mr. Ulf Kristersson, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Sweden. His Excellency, Mr. Edi Rama, Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania. His Excellency, Mr. Pedro Sanchez, President of the Government of the Kingdom of Spain. His Excellency, Mr. Bjarne Benediktsson, Prime Minister of the Republic of Iceland. His Excellency, Mr. Dick Schoof, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada. The Right Honourable Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Son Excellence, Monsieur Alexandre De Croo, Premier ministre du Royaume de Belgique. Her Excellency, Ms. Kaja Kallas, Prime Minister of the Republic of Estonia. Son Excellence, Monsieur Emmanuel Macron, Président de la République française.
Ladies and gentlemen, please look into the camera for 8 seconds. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the President of the United States. Excellences, le Secrétaire Général de l'OTAN et le Président des États-Unis.
So, good afternoon. Welcome to all of you. It's great to see you all here at this summit. Welcome to the NATO Summit in Washington. And many thanks to our host, the United States, and many thanks to you personally, President Biden. Dear Joe, there is no better place to celebrate the 75th anniversary of our alliance than right here in Washington, where the North Atlantic Treaty was signed back in 1949. So thank you so much for hosting us all here. And thank you also, President Biden, for your personal leadership and your strong commitment over many years to NATO, to our transatlantic alliance. This has all made us stronger. Let me also welcome Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson. This is your first time as a full member of the alliance, as Prime Minister attending a NATO summit. So welcome to the family, Ulf. It's great to see you here. In this first session, we will make decisions for our future security. We will strengthen our defense. 23 allies now meet the target of spending 2% of GDP on defense, up from just 3 allies in 2014 when we made the pledge to invest more in defense. We will increase our support for Ukraine by establishing a NATO coordination and the security assistance and training for Ukraine, and by ensuring a sustained support for the long term. Support to Ukraine is not charity, it is in our own security interest. And we will reinforce our partnerships in the Indo-Pacific to push against the growing alignment of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Let me now pass the floor to President Biden for his opening statement. So please, Joe, you have the floor.
Secretary General, allies, friends, 75 years ago, when our nations created the alliance, President Truman said, quote, "We hope to create a shield against aggression, the fear of aggression, and to permit us to get on with the real business of creating a government and society." For 75 years, our nations have grown and prospered behind the NATO shield. Today, we're stronger than we've ever been. Since I took office, we've doubled the number of battle groups in NATO's eastern flank, and the United States has. Finland and Sweden have joined the alliance, and the number of allies spending at least 2% on defense has gone from 9 to 23. That's not happened by chance, but by choice. At our summit 2 years ago, we launched a plan to modernize our deterrence and our defense. And today, we have to ask ourselves, what is next? How can we keep making the shield stronger? One answer must be to strengthen our industrial base. Right now, Russia is on a wartime footing with regard to defense production. They're significantly ramping up their production of weapons, munitions, and vehicles. And they're doing it with the help of China, North Korea, and Iran. We cannot, in my view, we cannot allow the alliance to fall behind. The fact is that so many of let me put it this way. I'm very pleased that today all NATO members are making the pledge to expand our industrial base and our industrial capacity, like our defense spending commitment. This is a critical step to maintaining our security. The first time ever, every NATO nation is pledging to develop plans for defense production at home. That means, as an alliance, we'll become more innovative and competitive. And we're able to produce more critical defense equipment more quickly than we may need it. You know, we will not be surpassed, we cannot be surpassed by anyone when it comes to our readiness. Here at home, Americans have seen the power of investments like these. In my administration, we've already invested $30 billion in defense manufacturing to restart or expand production across 35 of our states. We're investing billions more. The result, stronger supply chains, a stronger economy, stronger military, and a stronger nation. Let me close with this. This new pledge sends an unmistakable message to the world that every NATO member is committed to doing their part to keep the alliance strong. We can and will defend every inch of NATO territory, and we'll do it together. And that we're investing in our future strength to ensure NATO will always be ready for whatever threats we will face should be a clear message we're sending to the world. So I want to thank you, every NATO member, for your commitment for our shared security. And I will now ask the press to depart so we can get started.
Thank you so much, President Biden, for those remarks. And as the President said, this ends the public part of the meeting, and we ask the media to depart, and then we will continue just a second. Thank you so much.